Hey folks, welcome back to True Crime Stories, where we cover the most thrilling true crime stories. Before we get going, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for me. Thanks. And now let's get into today's story.
Okay, so um, we're diving into a case today that feels like it's straight out of like a true crime novel.
Yeah.
It's a murder mystery
Mm-hmm.
in a picture-perfect town.
Yeah,
Our victim is Vanessa Lee.
right.
She was a passionate environmental activist found murdered in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to go through the evidence. You'll see how twisted this whole thing gets. We
Right.
got forensic clues.
Yeah.
We got conflicting alibis.
Mm.
We got simmering town drama.
Yeah.
All pointing to a dark secret beneath the surface of this peaceful town.
What I find so interesting is how the case just peels back the layers of this idyllic town and you see the relationships and resentments.
Right.
The case files, the interview transcripts, and even Emily Taylor's article about the aftermath.
Oh, yeah.
It paints such a fascinating picture of a community that's like on the brink of change.
So let's set the scene first.
Okay.
Picture this.
Mm-hmm.
A picturesque town nestled by a large lake,
Yeah.
surrounded by woods.
Right?
The kind of place where everybody knows each other.
Mm-hmm.
Life moves at a slower pace.
Yeah.
But things were not as peaceful as they seemed.
No, the sources point to this like undercurrent of tension,
Right.
especially between like those resisting change
Mm-hmm.
and then the younger generation seeking progress.
Okay.
And this clash was fueled by this controversial logging project
Right.
that threatened the town's beauty.
And this is where Vanessa Lee comes in.
Yeah.
She wasn't just a casual hiker. She was a passionate activist dedicated to the environment.
You can really see her passion reflected in everything she did, her hikes, her explorations of the woods, even like her online presence.
Right.
She even named her dog Freya after the Norse goddess of nature.
Oh, wow.
It's a small detail, but it kind of resonates throughout the case, especially since Freya was treated by Josie the town vet like shortly before Vanessa vanished.
Oh, wow.
It adds this whole other emotional layer to the story.
Right.
It highlights her connection to the natural world
Right.
and the impact her loss had on those who knew her.
So this logging project really struck a nerve with this community.
Yeah.
Was it really that divisive?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
The project was spearheaded by Carl Jenkins, a wealthy and influential figure in town.
Right.
He saw it as like an economic boom, you know.
Yeah.
But many residents, especially younger folks like Vanessa,
Yeah.
were deeply concerned about the potential environmental damage.
So Vanessa wasn't afraid to make her voice heard.
Not at all.
Okay.
She was actively investigating the project, digging into potential environmental violations, unethical business practices.
Mm-hmm.
She even started a blog to expose the logging company's activities
Oh, wow.
and rallied the community to oppose the project.
So we have a victim who was making waves, challenging the status quo,
Right.
and making some powerful enemies along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk suspect.
Of course. The investigation uncovered this whole web of individuals with potential motives,
Okay.
connections to Vanessa. Each suspect's story adds another layer of intrigue to this complex case.
First up, we have Tommy Sutherland.
Right.
He's a logger who worked for Carl Jenkins' company
Yeah.
and was known to have publicly clashed with Vanessa.
Tommy really represents that old guard,
Okay.
the segment of the community that felt threatened by Vanessa's activism.
Okay.
He saw her as this outsider, disrupting their way of life, jeopardizing their livelihood.
Right?
And the case files reveal that he was very vocal about his dislike for Vanessa, often complaining about her blog posts, expressing his anger over her attempts to shut down the logging project.
Oh, wow.
He even went as far as making threatening remarks toward her,
Really?
which were witnessed and documented by several people.
Then we have Marie Patel,
Right.
Vanessa's close friend and fellow activist.
Yeah.
This one's interesting because it brings up the question, could envy have pushed her to the edge?
It's certainly a possibility that the investigators explored.
Yep.
On the surface, Marie seems like a devoted friend and supporter of Vanessa's activism.
Okay.
However, as the investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a potential undercurrent of jealousy in their relationship.
What makes you say that?
Well, the interview transcripts in Emily's article
Okay.
shed light on some pretty telling details.
Okay.
Marie had invested so much time and effort in helping Vanessa with her campaigns,
Hmm.
but often felt overshadowed by Vanessa's charisma and growing online fame.
Right.
It's a dynamic we see a lot in cases involving close friends or collaborators, where one person's success can trigger feelings of inadequacy or resentment in the other.
So it's possible that Marie's support for Vanessa masked, like, a deeper resentment.
Exactly.
All
It's
right.
a classic element of psychological thrillers.
Right.
The seemingly supportive friend harboring a hidden motive,
Right.
and the fact that Marie suggested they start a joint travel blog,
Uh-huh.
an idea that Vanessa dismissed, adds fuel to this theory.
Okay.
It makes you wonder if that rejection maybe pushed her resentment over the edge.
Then there's Carl Jenkins, the wealthy owner of the logging company.
Right.
It seems like he had a lot to lose if Vanessa's activism succeeded.
Carl really represents the establishment, the power structure that Vanessa was challenging.
Right.
He was deeply resentful of her activism,
Mm-hmm.
viewing it as a direct threat to his financial interests and reputation.
Okay.
He saw her as a nuisance, a troublemaker who was stirring up unnecessary problems.
Did the investigators find anything concrete linking him to Vanessa?
Well, the source material suggests that Carl might have resorted to intimidation tactics in the past to silence his opponents.
Really?
He was known for his ruthless business practices and his connections to influential figures in town.
Okay.
Some witnesses even claim to have seen him arguing with Vanessa just days before her disappearance.
Oh, wow.
However, proving his direct involvement in the murder would be a challenge, as he was very careful about covering his tracks.
It sounds like Carl was a master manipulator, able to pull strings behind the scenes.
Exactly. He was a powerful figure in the community. And he knew how to use his influence to get what he wanted.
Okay.
The investigators suspected he might have had a hand in Vanessa's disappearance,
Uh-huh.
but lacked the concrete evidence to directly link him to the crime.
Okay, so we've got a logger with a grudge, a potentially jealous friend,
Yeah.
and a wealthy businessman with a motive.
Right.
Are there any other suspects we should know about?
Yes, there are two more individuals who caught the investigators' attention.
Okay.
One is Beverly Moore, a town council member with a history of supporting economic growth over environmental concerns.
Ah, so she was on Carl's side of the logging project debate.
Precisely. Beverly was a vocal advocate for the logging project,
Okay.
arguing that it would bring much-needed jobs and revenue to the town.
Right.
She often clashed with Vanessa at town council meetings, dismissing her concerns about the environmental impact.
Oh.
Her staunch support for Carl Jenkins and the logging project made her a person of interest.
Was there anything beyond her political stance that made her a suspect?
Well, the sources indicate that Beverly's relationship with Carl ran deeper than just shared political views.
Okay.
There were rumors of undisclosed financial ties between them, suggesting that she may have personally profited from the logging project.
Oh, wow.
There's a potential conflict of interest,
Right.
coupled with her public disdain for Vanessa's activism, put her squarely on the list of suspects.
So she's a powerful figure in town, potentially entangled in a web of corruption.
Yeah.
And she publicly disagreed with Vanessa.
Right.
That's definitely suspicious. Who's a final suspect?
The last person on our list is Evelyn Evie Sanders,
Okay.
a hiker with a past rivalry with Vanessa.
Okay.
She might seem like an unlikely suspect at first,
Right.
but the investigators uncovered this history of competitive tension between her and Vanessa,
Really?
stemming from a hiking competition years ago.
A hiking competition. Really?
And it might sound insignificant,
Yeah.
but the sources suggest that this rivalry ran deeper than just a simple competition. Apparently there was a trophy involved, and Vanessa had won it several years in a row,
Oh, why?
much to Evie's frustration.
Okay. That adds a little more weight to it,
Right.
but it still seems like a stretch.
Of course, on its own, this rivalry might not seem like much.
Right.
But remember, we're looking at this complex web of relationships and simmering tensions.
Mm-hmm.
Add to that the fact that Evie was known to frequent the same hiking trails as Vanessa,
Right.
and it becomes a detail worth considering.
This is already a tangled web, and we haven't even touched on the forensic evidence or the interviews. I have a feeling this is about to get a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
All right, so we've met our cast of characters,
Right.
each with their own secrets and motives.
Yeah.
But what does the physical evidence tell us?
Yeah.
Let's get into the forensic details of this case.
Okay, so this is where the story takes a darker turn.
Okay.
Vanessa's body was discovered deep in the woods, concealed under a thicket of ferns. The autopsy revealed that she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head consistent with a heavy object.
Was there any indication of what kind of object might have been used?
Well, the medical examiner determined the shape and size of the wound were consistent with a rock or a piece of heavy wood,
Okay.
something readily available in a wooded area.
Right.
However, no murder weapon was ever recovered from the crime scene.
Okay, so that must have made things even more difficult for the investigators.
Yeah.
Did they find any other clues on Vanessa's body?
They did. In addition to the head wound, there were ligature marks on her neck suggesting she had been strangled.
Oh, wow.
And perhaps the most chilling detail was the way her body was found,
Okay.
wrapped in a thick industrial-grade plastic sheeting.
That's a really disturbing detail. It seems like something you'd see in like a meticulously planned crime,
Right.
not a spur-of-the-moment act of violence.
You're absolutely right. The use of the plastic sheeting points to premeditation. Someone went to great lengths to conceal Vanessa's body and likely transport it to the secluded location where it was found.
Right.
This wasn't a random act of violence. It was calculated and carefully executed.
What about the toxicology report? Did it reveal anything significant?
Interestingly, the toxicology report detected traces of a sedative in Vanessa's system,
Okay.
a benzodiazepine commonly prescribed for anxiety and insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
This suggests that she was likely incapacitated before the murder took place,
Oh, wow.
adding another layer of premeditation to the crime.
So it sounds like whoever killed Vanessa wanted to make sure she couldn't fight back or call for help.
Right.
Did they find any DNA or fingerprints at the crime scene?
Unfortunately, the heavy rainfall that summer had washed away most of the potential trace evidence,
Right.
making it difficult to obtain usable fingerprints or DNA samples.
Right.
However, the investigators did find a few key pieces of physical evidence.
Like what?
Well, remember how Vanessa's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting? Forensic analysis revealed some unique fibers embedded in the plastic.
Could they trace those fibers back to a specific source?
They could. The fibers were a specific type of cotton blend commonly used in work clothes,
Okay.
particularly the heavy-duty gloves worn by construction workers and loggers.
Yeah.
And remember, Carl Jenkins Logging Company had a crew working in the area.
Right, so we have a potential link back to the logging project
Yeah.
and to some of our suspects.
It
Did the interviews shed any light on these findings?
Let's get into those interview transcripts. Remember Tommy Sutherland, the logger who had publicly clashed with Vanessa?
Yeah.
His interview was particularly revealing.
Okay.
He was visibly nervous and gave conflicting accounts of his whereabouts on the day Vanessa disappeared.
So his alibi didn't check out.
Not entirely. He claimed to have been at the lumber yard all day, but there were no records of him clocking in for work, and several coworkers confirmed he wasn't on an official shift that day.
And I bet those threatening remarks he made about Vanessa didn't help his case.
They certainly didn't. When confronted with the witness statements detailing his threats,
Yeah.
Tommy downplayed them as just angry talk, claiming he never intended to actually harm her.
Right.
However, his flustered responses and evasive answers only raised further suspicion.
It sounds like his anger and resentment toward Vanessa were pretty well known in town.
Absolutely. Several witnesses described Tommy as increasingly agitated in the weeks leading up to Vanessa's disappearance.
Okay.
They reported hearing him make disparaging comments about her, accusing her of trying to destroy their way of life.
What about Marie? Did her interview reveal anything about her possible jealousy?
Marie's interview was much more controlled than Tommy's,
Okay.
but there were subtle hints of resentment and envy beneath the surface. She spoke highly of Vanessa, but also acknowledged feeling frustrated about not receiving the same level of recognition for her contributions to their activism.
So the seeds of jealousy were definitely there.
Mm-hmm.
Did Emily, the journalist who wrote about the case, offer any insights into Marie's behavior?
She did. Emily spent a considerable amount of time interviewing both Marie and Vanessa for her article.
Right.
She described sensing an underlying tension between them despite their outward display of friendship.
Okay.
Emily noted that Marie often downplayed her own role in their activism and seemed fixated on Vanessa's growing online popularity.
It's fascinating how someone outside the situation can pick up on these subtle dynamics that those directly involved might miss.
Right.
What about Carl Jenkins?
Oh, Carl was a completely different story.
Okay.
He remained composed and arrogant throughout his interview, almost as if he were above suspicion.
Right.
He downplayed his disagreements with Vanessa, assuming them as simple business disputes.
Okay.
He even scoffed at the suggestion that he would ever resort to violence.
Classic power move, trying to intimidate the detectives with his wealth and influence.
Right.
Did his alibi hold up?
Not entirely. He claimed to have been out of town on business on the day of Vanessa's disappearance. But the details are vague, and he couldn't provide concrete proof of his whereabouts.
And remember those fibers found at the crime scene? The ones linked to work gloves.
Well, it turned out that the specific type of cotton blend found in those fibers
Yeah.
was unique to a brand of work gloves exclusively supplied to Carl's logging company.
Oh, wow.
It was a detail that placed him or someone connected to him at the scene of the crime.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see the web of connections here.
Yeah.
What about Beverly Moore, the council member?
Yeah.
Did her interview reveal anything about her relationship with Carl?
Beverly was a tough nut to crack.
Okay.
She was very careful with her words, sticking to her official schedule, and claiming to be at various meetings on the day Vanessa disappeared. However, her connection to Carl kept coming up. And it was clear that their relationship went beyond just shared political views.
What kind of evidence did they have to suggest a deeper connection?
Well, the investigators had uncovered financial records showing a series of transactions between Carl's company and a shell corporation linked to Beverly.
Okay.
It seemed that she had been receiving regular payments from Carl, possibly as kickbacks for her support of the logging project.
Wow.
This revelation shed light on a potential motive,
Right.
self-preservation. If Vanessa's investigation into Carl's business practices had exposed Beverly's involvement,
Right.
she could have faced serious legal consequences.
So she had a motive to protect Carl and silence Vanessa.
Right.
Did her alibi check out?
It did, to a certain extent. She was able to account for her whereabouts on the day Vanessa disappeared.
Okay.
But there were gaps in her timeline, and some witnesses placed her in the vicinity of the wooded area where Vanessa's body was found.
So it sounds like she had something to hide.
Yeah.
What about our final suspect, Evie Sanders?
Right.
Did they find any evidence linking her to the crime scene?
Evie's alibi was the most solid of all the suspects.
Yeah.
She had been hiking alone by Clear Lake on the day of Vanessa's disappearance.
Right.
And several independent witnesses corroborated her account.
Okay.
However, there were inconsistencies in her statements regarding her hiking route.
What do you mean by inconsistencies?
Well, she initially claimed to have taken a specific trail, but when confronted with the fact that that trail was closed for maintenance on the day in question,
Okay.
she changed her story. This discrepancy, combined with her history of rivalry with Vanessa, kept her on the investigators' radar.
Okay.
But there wasn't enough concrete evidence to connect her directly to the crime.
So we've got a web of suspects.
Right.
Conflicting alibis.
Yeah.
Forensic evidence pointing to a premeditated murder.
Mm-hmm.
This is a lot to unpack.
I know.
I'm dying to know how it all comes together. Okay. So we've got a town full of secrets, a murdered activist,
Right.
and a handful of suspects with motives that are as tangled as the trails in those woods.
Yeah.
I'm on the edge of my seat waiting to find out how this unravels. What was the turning point in the investigation?
The investigators caught a break when they received an anonymous tip.
Gosh.
Someone claiming to have information about Vanessa's murder contacted the police, leading them to a secluded spot near the lake.
Okay.
And that's where they found it.
Found what? Don't leave me hanging.
The murder weapon.
Oh, wow.
It was a heavy piece of driftwood,
Okay.
consistent with the shape and size of the wound on Vanessa's head.
Hmm.
And forensic testing revealed traces of blood and hair matching Vanessa's DNA, as well as a partial fingerprint.
Was the fingerprint a match to any of our suspects?
It was. The fingerprint belonged to Tommy Sutherland.
Whoa, that's a game changer.
It was the piece of evidence they needed to solidify their case against him.
Right.
They already had his shaky alibi, his history of threats against Vanessa, and the incriminating fibers found at the crime scene.
Right.
Now they had the murder weapon with his fingerprints on it.
Did they arrest him right away?
They did, armed with the new evidence. They obtained a warrant for Tommy's arrest and apprehended him at his home. And with the murder weapon in hand, Tommy's carefully constructed facade crumbled.
Yeah.
He confessed.
What did he say?
Tommy's confession was this mix of anger, regret, and desperation. He admitted to confronting Vanessa in the woods that day,
Okay.
but he claimed he hadn't gone there intending to kill her.
Okay.
He said he just wanted to scare her to make her stop her campaign against the logging project.
So he was trying to protect his way of life, his job.
That's what he claimed.
Okay.
He said he felt like Vanessa was attacking his community, his livelihood, and his identity.
Right.
But things spiraled out of control. An argument turned into a physical altercation, and in a moment of blind rage, he struck her with the driftwood.
It sounds like a classic crime of passion fueled by the tension surrounding the logging project.
Yeah.
Did he explain why he wrapped her body in plastic?
He did. He said that after he realized what he'd done, panic set in.
Okay.
He didn't know what to do. So he wrapped Vanessa's body in the plastic sheeting he had in his truck and drove to a secluded area, hoping to conceal the crime.
So it wasn't a premeditated murder as the plastic sheeting initially suggested.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
While Tommy insisted that he hadn't planned to kill Vanessa, the fact that he had the plastic sheeting readily available in his truck raises questions.
Right.
Was it just a coincidence?
Right.
Or was there a darker motive lurking beneath the surface?
It's hard to believe that someone would just happen to have that kind of material on hand.
Right.
Unless they were planning something nefarious.
Yeah.
Did he implicate anyone else in his confession?
He did. And this is where the case takes another unexpected turn.
Okay.
Tommy revealed that he wasn't acting alone.
Oh, wow.
He claimed that Carl Jenkins, the owner of the logging company, had been paying him to keep tabs on Vanessa and intimidate her into backing down from her campaign.
Wait, so Carl was involved after all?
Yeah.
What was his role in all of this?
According to Tommy, Carl was growing increasingly frustrated with Vanessa's activism.
Okay.
He saw her as a major threat to his business interests and was determined to silence her by any means necessary.
So he hired Tommy as like his enforcer.
Essentially, Tommy claimed that Carl had provided him with information about Vanessa's whereabouts, encouraged him to confront her, and even hinted at a bonus if he could persuade her to drop her investigation.
Wow, it sounds like Carl was the mastermind behind all of this, pulling the strings from the shadows.
That's certainly what Tommy's confession suggested. However, proving Carl's involvement would be a challenge.
Why is that? Didn't Tommy's confession provide enough evidence to charge Carl?
Unfortunately, no. Tommy's confession was considered hearsay evidence, which is inadmissible in court unless there's corroborating evidence to support it.
So even though Tommy admitted to working for Carl, they couldn't use that information to build a case against Carl himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They needed more than just Tommy's word.
Right.
They needed independent evidence to corroborate his claims and establish a direct link between Carl and the crime.
What about the financial records they found? The ones showing payments from Carl to Beverly Moore.
Right.
Could those be used to build a case against Carl?
Those records were certainly incriminating.
Yeah.
But they didn't directly link Carl to Vanessa's murder.
Okay.
They pointed to corruption and possible bribery, but not to a conspiracy to commit murder.
So despite all the suspicions and circumstantial evidence, Carl managed to evade justice.
He did. While Tommy was charged with murder and ultimately convicted, Carl Jenkins walked away a free man, his reputation tarnished, but his freedom intact.
It sounds like Emily, the journalist, played a crucial role in exposing the truth about Carl's involvement.
Absolutely.
Even if the legal system couldn't hold him fully accountable.
Emily's in-depth article about the case brought national attention to the corruption and environmental destruction happening in this seemingly idyllic town.
Right.
She detailed Tommy's confession, exposed Carl's shady business practices, and highlighted the systemic issues that allowed someone like Carl to operate with impunity. Her work sparked public outrage and led to calls for greater scrutiny of the logging industry and its impact on the environment.
So while justice wasn't fully served in the legal sense, Emily's work served as a form of accountability, ensuring that Carl's actions didn't go unnoticed.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It also brought about positive changes in the community.
Okay.
The public outcry led to stricter environmental regulations, and the town council implemented new measures to prevent corruption and increase transparency.
It's a bittersweet ending, isn't it?
It is.
Vanessa's tragic death exposed the dark underbelly of this town.
Yeah.
But it also sparked a movement for change.
Yeah.
What happened to Tommy Sutherland?
Tommy pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter as part of a plea deal.
Okay.
He was sentenced to 15 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to Vanessa's family.
And what about the town itself? Did they ever recover from this tragedy?
The town was forever changed by Vanessa's death.
Yeah.
It forced them to confront difficult truths about their community.
Right.
And the price of progress.
Yeah.
The logging project was ultimately abandoned, and a memorial park was created in Vanessa's honor.
Wow.
Dedicated to preserving the natural beauty she fought so hard to protect.
It's a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, hope and change can emerge.
Absolutely.
What happened to Marie Patel and the other suspects?
Marie continued her activism, but she was haunted by the guilt of her own jealousy
Right.
and the knowledge that she had misjudged her friend.
Yeah.
She dedicated her life to honoring Vanessa's memory and fighting for the causes they both believed in.
Uh-huh.
As for the other suspects, Beverly Moore resigned from the town council amidst the scandal,
Okay.
and her reputation was forever tarnished.
Right.
Evie Sanders eventually left town, unable to escape the shadow of suspicion that hung over her.
So what does this all mean?
Right.
We've seen a conviction, a town grappling with its conscience, a powerful journalist shining a light on corruption,
Yeah.
and ultimately a community striving for change.
What's so fascinating about this case is how it transcends the typical murder mystery.
Right.
It's a story about environmentalism, about the fight for what's right and the price some are willing to pay for speaking truth to power. It's a reminder that even in the most picturesque places, darkness can lurk beneath the surface,
Yeah.
and that justice isn't always black and white.
It's a chilling reminder that our actions have consequences,
Right.
and that sometimes even the smallest acts of courage can ignite a movement for change.
Absolutely.
Well, folks, that's our deep dive into the Under a Tattered Moon case. We hope you found it as fascinating and thought-provoking as we did.
I know, I did.
Remember, the truth is often buried beneath the surface,
Yeah.
waiting to be uncovered. And sometimes the search for justice leads to unexpected consequences.
Right.
Until next time, stay curious and keep asking questions.